Hi everyone, my name is Lydia. I had toxic mold for about 4 to 5 years, which don't be alarmed by that. That was just my experience. A lot of people don't deal with it for that long. I did. It was a crazy experience, and I felt like I was on my deathbed the entire time. So that's a little bit about me to preface. Very sick. It was a complete all body experience, toxic mold was for me. And my experience was very interesting because I, for the most part, felt extremely brain fogged every single day. Extreme fatigue. Actually, my cortisol levels were severely, dangerously low, far lower than the average human's rise and fall of their day and night cycle. And consistently low. Even my rise was very low, much lower than the average. And so I was kind of like a walking zombie for those several years. And I will say what helped me in those moments, what helped me to get to my clearest mindset, what saved me really was one, being outside. In general, being outside, it always helped me, especially since I could go near Lake Superior, and that was extremely beneficial. The water, for some reason, was like a magnet for me, and I feel like my mom also felt that way too when she was in toxic mold. And it was like a magnet. It was like when I was outside, I just felt so called to go by that water. And the biggest, like one of the biggest things that helped me with my mental clarity and my sanity even was grounding. Putting my bare feet onto the soil, onto the grass, onto the earth. And some people say it's pseudoscience, it's not real, it's whatever. But the proof was in my own experience. I can't even tell you how much clearer I was, how much more hopeful I was about my situation, and it was an every time experience for me. I would be a week just feeling so out of it, getting worse. My depression was sinking in. And every day was a consuming thought of how do I get out of this. I talk about this a lot on here, but it was a all-encompassing experience for me. And it was fascinating because I would feel so hopeless, and then the moment that I was able to go outside and put my feet into the grass, into the soil, it's like my brain started moving again. I no longer was disassociating, at least not as bad, not as severe. My brain fog was so heavy previously that it was like even forming sentences were difficult for me. I wouldn't talk to anybody for weeks. Not even a single sentence. It was just silence. It was just silence and a lot of crying. And when I stepped foot outside, onto the bare grass, onto the earth, and I mean, for the most part, it was hard to walk anywhere, so I would usually just sit on the ground or on a bench and just make sure that my feet were barefoot on the ground. And after a couple minutes, it would start to sink in, and I would notice that my brain was starting to come up with ideas and solutions on how to get out. Now, some of them stuck and some of them worked, some of them did not. But the fact that my brain was moving and thinking, that's really what held me together and kept moving me forward in life, is those moments where I would sit down on a bench and just feel my mind start to awaken and feel the gears start to turning. And then I would start to talk about it a little bit and think about my feelings lately, because they could all start to come to the surface after my brain started to clear up a little bit. those moments were so important. They were crucial. And it's fascinating because when people say that grounding doesn't work, it's like they just haven't tried it, maybe, or maybe they just feel such a deep disconnect from their body. But I don't even believe that's true, because I felt such a deep disconnect from my body, a deep disconnect. I felt a deep disconnect from everything. I felt like a literal walking zombie, a literal like walking ghost. And yet, the moment I stepped foot on bare earth and just stood there for a little bit, let the energy just absorb into me, every time, and it wasn't that I was expecting it or thinking that it was going to happen. In the beginning especially, I was like, well, it just feels really good to put my feet on the ground. It feels really nice. Why not? This is great. It's great outside, you know? And I knew that being outside into the at least some semblance of sun was healthy for me. So it's you know, it was a lot of that in the very beginning. It was a lot of me just knowing that getting out of the house was also beneficial for me, but not necessarily thinking that grounding was going to be this groundbreaking thing in my life. I just did it, and like clockwork, every single time my brain would start moving and I would start to think of ideas on how to get out of this awful situation. And I would start to think about all of the things that I couldn't process. It was like I had this all held up together because my brain just could not fathom thinking through my own emotions. It was just held up in my brain until I was outside and began to talk and began to think about all of these things that I needed to process. And then I would feel so much better. I would feel so much better. And then I would use it as a moment to pray about all of these things, because that was for the first time when I felt like my emotions had been processed and I could get down to the root of it and I could pray about that root of it, and it helped me for the future. And it is interesting because even though in those moments I was so unbelievably gone mentally, I think the fact that those moments that I was outside and able to process and come to a single, maybe emotional issue that I would pray about, it helped me grow as a person during toxic mold, even though that was an extremely dark period of my life, an extremely traumatic period of my life. I still was able to grow as a human being, and I think I should owe a lot of that to grounding, because it helped me be clear enough to grow. Which is kind of an interesting comparison, because, you know, when you think of putting your bare feet on earth, it is sort of similar to planting yourself, right? Like planting yourself like a plant and allowing yourself to grow, allowing the earth to run through you as you grow, similar to a plant. It's kind of an interesting analogy, but I gotta owe grounding to a lot of my healing and a lot of my growth throughout toxic mold, because I easily could have just become a spiraling mess during that time, and I still was to a great degree, but at least I did some healthy growing as well during that time. And I allowed a lot of what we were going through, a lot of that turmoil that I was going through, I allowed that to teach me things. So, you know, when people say that grounding doesn't work, grounding is pseudoscience, maybe those people haven't given it a chance. Maybe those people haven't documented themselves enough to see the difference. I don't know. Because I saw a major difference. It was night and day. And it was crazy because even the time when I started to actually think of a way to get out, like a real way. I would always try to think of ways. It was a constant try. It was a constant try. It was always in my head. How do I get out? How do I get out? Even when I wasn't grounding. But when I was grounding, it was like I could start to actually unpeel what would work, what couldn't work, the things that I could actually try and implement in my life. What can I do? What can't I do? How? It definitely helped me set up plans and effort. And sometimes it was hard to come up with a plan, but I still was clear enough to pray. And that was everything. That was absolutely everything. But even when I did come up with the plan that we executed to get out of toxic mold, it happened while we were outside, bare feet on the ground, thinking. That's when we were the most clear, my mom and I. That's when my brain was able to turn enough, and I felt encouraged enough to get out. It works. It works. That's all I can say. So try it yourself. Try it yourself. And if you are in toxic mold, definitely try grounding. Get outside as much as you can, as much as you can, because I couldn't ground all the time. I mean, it snows a lot where I live. A lot. Just an insane amount. It's like Narnia almost every year. And I couldn't always ground. But getting outside sure did help. And then grounding was this whole other level. So if you can ground bare feet on the ground somewhere, go to a park, even go out your front door. It's a game changer. It's a game changer.